So this is an interesting topic, right? We've been asked to talk about how to build a brand, and I'm going to just add the word sustainable. The word brand in my mind in the education sector is an oxymoron, because education is treated like a social responsibility, and the word brand comes from commercialism. So when we say brand in education, in itself, it's a contradictory term. Having said that, every school needs to stand out. Every school needs to have visibility, needs to have recall, which is where brand building is an essential part of institutional building. And we have a very interesting panel here. Interesting because we have people who've been in the industry for generations. I mean, the institutions have been there for generations. And we also have people who are, early or the first generation people. So people who have been part of legacy institutions look at branding very differently than people who are first generation people. So my recommendation to you is you might want to first see in the journey of your institution where you are placed. Because wherever you are placed, you should peg to the next level. You should take a leap forward in the branding exercises of your institution to the next level. And for those who are students in the room, if you aspire to come to education, this is possibly one of the strategies for launching. So let's just get started with, I'm going to start with the legacy products. Right next to me, I have Roshan Gandhi. I've known Roshan for a long time. He comes from a very old family that runs institutions in Lucknow, and he's going to talk more about it. He's lived in London for several years, grew up there, came for a stint to India, and went back. I'd like to hear from you, Roshan, about when you have such an old institution, one would imagine that you're sorted. So what has been the challenges of staying afloat, of reinventing yourselves?
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having us. It's a very interesting question. Every business, every organization, every company, not just in education, but anywhere, that lasts for a long time needs to constantly reinvent itself, needs to adapt to changing times. And there are so many classic examples of companies that failed to see the changes that were happening around. Big successful companies that ended up failing. Think of Kodak, in photography. They failed to see the rise of digital photography. Or Nokia, everyone had a Nokia mobile phone, and then when smartphones came, they failed to adapt. And they didn't change themselves. So these strong, very well-established brands ended up failing. But at the same time, we remember these brand names almost fondly. They still have a gravitas. They still have a strength, because those brands in their time, even though they've been gone now for decades, were such strong presences. And so I think that sort of example highlights the issue in brands with legacies and change over time. Because the question is about, how do you update your brand and change your brand to change with times. And in education, somewhere I feel you don't change your brand. You change what you're doing. You change your actions, you change your activities, you adapt to new pedagogies, you make sure that you're preparing children for a changing world, you respond to changing needs of the educational landscape, the rise of technology, et cetera, et cetera. But your core brand image is probably built on something else. It's not built necessarily on what you're doing. It's built on how you're doing it. It's built on your attitudes. It's built on whether people perceive that they can trust you with their children, whether their children are safe with you, whether you're going to nurture their children in your school. Majority of the child's time is spent inside the walls of the school, and parents need that trust. So that's where the brand building really comes from. And of course, yes, delivering education well, delivering good pedagogy, good curriculum, competent teachers, et cetera, all of that is important to maintain a reputation. But that changes over time. What stays the same is your core attitude. And I think, you mentioned about brands, business being, the oxymoron perhaps in the use of the word brand, which is a business term in a social sector. And that problem reflects in the idea of trying to change brands over time. Because you've built your brand probably based on your social activity, probably based on the investments that you make in children, which don't necessarily have a measurable return. You can pump your resources into activities for children and special initiatives and projects for children that they benefit from, and you can't measure the outcome of that in an exam result or in a number of admissions to university or placements in IAS of your children further down the line. You can't measure some of that investment. You do it because you love the children, and through doing that, you build up trust and people start to love your brand. And that's all because of your social activity. So I do think there is an oxymoron here. But I think at the same time, your brand comes about because you focus on your care for the children. And you continue doing that, whatever pedagogical changes you make. And that's how you maintain a legacy while adapting to changing times.
Thank you, Roshan. So he represents the City Montessori School, and all of you you're familiar, everybody's familiar. You know how many decades of schooling this family has been indulging in. So I represent a group of schools called Kalorex schools from Gujarat. And I peg myself in the middle order. It's neither a legacy product nor like a kid off the block. So it's always very interesting for me to know, and I'm going to jump very quickly to Dr. Datta, who's the principal of Modern School of Barakhamba. Everybody knows Barakhamba. Modern School Barakhamba. Everybody knows its very tall stature. Anybody who fills in that position as a principal, Dr. Datta, has a lot of aspirations to fulfill. People have high order expectations. And there are inherent challenges of being relevant. I know that, like Roshan already mentioned, that trust is a very important factor of building any brand. But how do you maintain, how do you stay there? I think building something is slightly easier than staying there. So if I can have you respond, please.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. What a delight to be present here. First of all, I was back there standing, and the group that was sitting here earlier, the moderator said, well, we had the most fascinating session. I thought that the next one is going to be the most fascinating one. So let's live it up to the expectation. You used the word. Well, as for the expectation from the principal, it's been 8 years, so that pressure is a little taken away, because that is when you're coming into a school that is about 94 years old, that bit is there. So as I speak with you, I'm relieved from that expectation pressure. Legacy schools, yes, I worked in 2 of those, Mayo College and Modern, both 100 to 150-year-old schools. Brand, when you use the word with them, is a misnomer, because brand somehow, forgive my saying so, sounds a little more commercial than what an institution should be. An institution should be about gravitas, about substance, about what you deliver to the students and not what you advertise. What you have been doing over the years, over and over, I think that's what the brand stands for. And is there a blueprint to create a successful educational brand? I would say is, well, there is no formula as such. And nobody can give out a formula that, look, this is, if you apply, you are going to be successful as an educational brand. But yes, it's playing by the ear. It is living and learning every moment and growing. That's what makes the brand in the market. Again, it sounds very commercial when I use these two words. But yes, it's a material world and one has to be where one is. And to keep at the top, like you said, yes, is a challenge, all-time challenge, because there are a lot of kids on the block who are giving you a run for the money. They are, yes, of course, neck to neck, or even better, at times they get ahead and then you catch up because, of course, over the years, there are certain elements of complacency, I would not deny that, comes into old schools, into the teachers of old schools, students, anyone who's related, studying, has some amount of arrogance coming in just by virtue of being there. I always tell my students that the first door will open when you go and say modern Barakhamba, but then the remaining doors you will have to open for yourself. What you get in yourself, the substance, the word that I used, things that work in the real world, because one has to be original, genuine, and carrying something that one would always be proud of. Well, this morning, in my assembly, while I was sitting in my assembly, I had this thought. I was reminded that I have to go for this conclave. And I read out a very famous poem, prayer, lines by Rabindranath Tagore, which each one of you are very well familiar with. I would relate to it and then go on to say what I have to. And it's none other than the famous lines, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, of course, written by Tagore. So, when it comes the word mind, I think it relates to what are the ingredients of a successful brand, which go into making the blueprint of a successful brand in education is the mind, how you train the mind. The critical thinking, creative thinking, decision making, problem solving is all about going without fear, and the head is held high. When you say the held high, it has several components to it. One of them is that one doesn't bully another mentally or physically. You have to ensure that that is another ingredient. It is not only physical bullying, it is also the mental bullying at times, the pressure that are created, which a successful brand has to make sure that the place is stress-free. The word stress is used, is very common these days, so it has to be stress-free. That is very important for a successful educational brand blueprint. Then the line goes to say, where words come out from the depth of truth. Words. When I read out this morning, the thought came to my mind that communication skill is very, very important and becoming important by the day in the present world, where we have the mobile phones, we have so many ways of communicating. It is important that true communication stays in place and words come out from the depth of truth. Truth takes me to the values. The institution must uphold all values of humility, of truthfulness, and so many. There are endless virtues that a man must possess. So these educational institutions must have the value education, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection. It is emphasizing on hard work. There is no substitute to hard work. You cannot climb up the ladder of success with hands in your pockets. You have to work hard. There are no shortcuts in life. And then armed towards perfection. That made me think about the dream everyone should have, an institution should have, an individual should have, and the institution should promote the dream of individuals to let them do what they want to do. There are players from my school who are playing the IPL. They wanted to be cricketers, and we helped them develop their dream, and today they are achieving where they wanted to be. If I may briefly relate here, there's a boy, Ayush Badoni, who passed out 2 years ago, and he always dreamt of being a cricketer. I did my bit of talking to him and said, yes, you will do it. I made him stand next to me in the prize giving and said he's going to be a budding cricketer. He plays for Lucknow Giants currently. So when he came back after playing the last IPL, he related to me. He said, sir, you know, I have the poster of Mahendra Singh Dhoni right behind where I sleep. And 2 years ago, while we were passing out, we danced on the tune of Bravo is a Champion. And believe you me, when I went to play first time at an IPL, it was against Chennai team, the man behind the stumps was Mahendra Singh Dhoni, who was setting the field placement for me. And when I look as to who's coming to bowl at me, believe you me, it was Bravo. So it's letting the dream flourish. I think institutions, brand also goes up when you encourage such dreams of people and break away from the straitjacket of scoring well in the boards. Not everyone is cut out. Everyone, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, all its life it would remain believing that it is stupid, Einstein. So it is each one finding the potential in the student, finding the potential in a teacher, and how you work. I think principles go a long way in deciding that and make it a brand truly.
Awesome. I personally took away the fact that, of course, heart, hand and mind. You stressed on the mind. But to me, I really like the deep dream. It's about if you have the audacity to dream, then life is going to make it a reality. Sometimes we just don't have the audacity. So yeah, if the school is such a formative year, that if we teach these skills, the thinking skills, the deep thinking skills in children, and the ability to trust in their own dreams and abilities, I think we'll have a new order in society. I want to invite Reekrit here. He's a managing director of Satluj Group. The very word managing director in Satluj Group talks branding, right? So let's hear from you. What were, if I may, the top 3 elements or the top 3 characteristics you would say that are shortlisted, are surefire ways to at least make a visibility? Whether they sustain or not, I don't know, but clearly make a visibility.
It's a wonderful question. Thank you for the question, and plus it's an honor to be a part of the panel. Well, surprisingly, I began as an educationist, and then I of course went on to become the MD of the group. So I've seen both ends. I've seen both ends of the spectrum in this case. Well, I think it's a bit tricky in terms of educational institutions with regards to branding, because you particularly wouldn't want to be perceived as just a brand. You'd want to be perceived as an institution, as a legacy that can of course make sure that a child does well in life, and that's the trust due to which parents send the kids to our schools, and of course the rest of the schools of the speakers on the panel. When you're building a brand, I think it's very important to make sure that whatever the promises you make, that you follow through. So if you're saying that you're X and Y and Z, you've particularly got to make sure that when the kids walk in the gates of the school, and when the parents ask the kids about the experiences that they've had at school, that there's some sort of a link between what you're saying you're doing and what you've actually done. I think that's where a lot of schools, then they fall short. Apart from that, it's very important to understand this case that branding isn't just about how your brand is perceived. It's about what you're doing as a brand as well. What is your vision? What is your aim? What's your long-term vision in this case as well? I think that the difference between schools and other organizations in this case is that I think in terms of education, we have to be really discreet about considering ourselves a brand, despite the fact that the platforms are the same. So you've got your Facebook, Instagram, so on and so forth, and then you've got your print ads, you've got your pamphleting, you've got various PR events that you hold, and then there are many more things that schools also do. But the thing is that you've got to be more discreet about portraying yourself as a brand, rather than what businesses in terms of for profit are doing. So I think that's the tricky part in terms of educational brand building, and I think that's something that we possibly have to work around. Now, if you look at the Western world, you'll see in most of the countries education is deemed for profit, whereas in India I think that we beat around the bush, given the various regulations that we have. There's just one education institution that's been able to declare itself a profit, after decades. I think that what holds educational institutions back in terms of branding, and what holds various educational institutions back in terms of growing as a brand, is the fact that there's a lot of ambiguity in terms of the relevance, and also in terms of the structure of education within this country, right? So if things could be made much more clear, if the regulatory framework was much more clear, and if there were guidelines in terms of how education institutions can of course run without being managed by the state, I think that's one thing that of course will help in terms of brand building a bit more. But if you look at brand building on the whole, I think the best way to build a brand in terms of education is to, of course, number one, be relevant, change with time, of course, because then you have to change with time. I think that's the whole crux of change. Apart from that, to follow through in terms of the promises that you've made to the parents that of course want to admit the kids in your school, and then the third part, of course, is that to have a decent mixture in terms of the various brand protocols that you want to follow. So if you want to advertise, if you want to do PR, if you want to go social, so you've got to find out the right mix and then grow from there.
Nirvaan, I'll let you settle in a bit. I'll ask a question and come last to you. So Mukesh ji ke liye, आपने जिक्र की fee regulation ka. I come from Gujarat. It has one of the stringent fee regulation committees, where advertisement budgets are not allowed. We are not allowed to show advertisement as expenditure. That is a permissible expenditure. Now my question to you, Mukesh ji, is you run an institution, an IB institution. You're a first-timer in the field of education. And I'm sure that when you start an institution, there are pushes and pulls in many directions. At the same time, you have to build a brand for visibility. So how do you balance, how do you which slice of the cake are you cutting essentially to make all the ends meet is the question.
A very good afternoon to one and all present here. It is an absolute honor to be sitting right next to Dr. Datta with the eminent panelists, who've got significant experience as an educationist. I don't have any experience. All I had was one thing which, sir talked about, dream. I wanted to start something when I was studying in a school. And I hated going to school. I wasn't one of the, the merit students. In fact, I was one of the blessed ones to have studied at Birla Higher Secondary School in Pilani, where my education was done. Then I got into BITS Pilani through staff quota. I did my graduation, but during school days and graduation days also, I wanted to start something of my own. And it took me 7 years after graduating to start a company in tech space. I had the privilege of working with Harvard University and Oxford and whatnot, mostly in edtech space. I started a company which was more to do not just to make money, it was to change the perception of people for a particular role in computers, like software developer versus software tester. And when I accomplished it, I said, you know what, I am done. So I took an early retirement. I retired when I was 39. And I just got into golfing. And then, I was playing golf with one of very senior educationists, and he said, you know what, you're one of the blessed ones, why don't you do something, right? Instead of just enjoying what you built. I got an opportunity to meet with the Jayaprakash Group current chairman, Manoj God, when he was going into difficult situation. I wanted to build a school, but not an IB one to begin with. I wanted to build a school for talented children of below the poverty line ones. And I'm sorry I'm deviating from this, but I think it is relevant, very important for all of you to know. When this happened, I said, I'm going to make this school. So I helped JP Group, and I said, okay, fine, I'll take this plot. Within a month, they went bankrupt or declared bankruptcy. So I had no other option but to build the school. We built our complete school in 10 months. I had, the tech business to fund me, so it worked out well. But then, I was thinking about what is it that I want to do. I don't want to be just another school on the block. I didn't want DPS or any other school's franchisee. I wanted to create something unique. So that's when I thought about Prometheus. Prometheus is a Greek god who stole fire from the god of gods, Zeus, and gave it for mankind. So I said, you know what, I want to be able to create, fire in the belly of every child, because every child is unique, and everybody has got something unique, special that they can do, right? So with that intent, I started Prometheus. I said, let me make IB affordable. So there are other schools in the neighborhood. We are around 30% down in terms of fees, lower fees, and we pay 30% more to the teachers who were from similar schools. And IB teachers are very difficult to find, I can tell you that. I couldn't have achieved what I have achieved in 3 years had it not been for a great team that I had recruited. The team that is aligned with my vision, the team that is aligned with what I'm trying to achieve through Prometheus. So 6 months into the school, September 30, 2019, we started school, and 6 months down the line, it was pandemic. So imagine a school that started with 30 students and pandemic hit, so parents wanting to, not have a child be registered for online school and pay for that, pay that much fee also. But because of my edtech background, it took us just 24 hours to switch to online learning. In 3 years, we've got more than 500 students. We've established ourselves as a school that just doesn't talk. It is basically the action on the ground. It is students' voice, parents' voice, but before they came on board, it was my voice. This is what I'm trying to achieve. So I said there are 3 goals that the school has, 3 important ones. One is I want to be able to create entrepreneurs at school. I want to be able to create entrepreneurs. So for that, there is a complete ecosystem that is required. You can't create entrepreneurs by just saying that you want to create entrepreneurs. So we've got an incubation fund. I work with a lot of startups wherein the founders are still studying in college. And that is something, that our students look at and they feel encouraged and motivated to look at the problems around them and work towards solving them using technology or otherwise. The second thing that I wanted to work on was, what can I do as a school with parents and students and with the support of teachers for the country that has second largest population in the world. But when it comes to Olympics, we are nowhere there. Cricket, we are in top 3. We are probably number 1 also. My emphasis is not on cricket. My emphasis is on preparing Olympians, nurturing students to get us medal at Olympics. That said, we built, we invested significant amount. In fact, I took an exit last year from my company, tech company, because, it's not easy to run a school without having any, background or enough funding. So my tech background gave me, or tech exit gave me significant funds to be able to live my dream, or dream of creating Olympians. In fact, so we've got all-weather 50 meters indoor pool. So even in the month of January, you'll see at least 50 swimmers practicing at our school facility. We've got Olympic-sized badminton courts, which are air-conditioned, and 8 of those. It's not just makeshift arrangement to learn a particular sport. It is basically a center for high performers. So that is my second goal. The third one is, what is it that we can do to make teaching as one of the sought-after professions? So with these 3 goals, and I'm already working towards that, there is the entrepreneurship thing that I've talked about, that will help us in getting the teachers recognized and rewarded. Now, while you are right that schools cannot have that advertising budget, but I used my private limited company to do all the advertising. And more than anything, what has worked is the word of mouth. That these guys are delivering what they have promised. They are doing what they have promised. So that's my take on it.
Absolutely. So I got my answer. I think you talked about micro-focus, because you talked about your school being known as a school that creates the Olympic spirit, preparing children for Olympics, and that itself is a mindset. And you also talked about entrepreneurship. So like I earlier mentioned, I'm from Gujarat, and we have sectoral universities. We have universities that do just architecture, just design, and just forensic. So it's that vertical, it's the creating the depth, and that itself is a branding tool. So now let me come to you, Nirvaan. During the IPL, one of the things that really struck me was, when I talk about it, you'll say, oh my God, yeah. The only people who were advertising on the cricket grounds were EdTech. The Baijus and the unacademies of the world were the only people who were advertising. It was not private industry. It was not infrastructure. It was not the Adanis or the Ambanis. It was EdTech. And I was like, really? So my question to you is, the name Birla brings to mind a huge legacy. Like we've talked the Gandhi name, or we've talked the modern school name. Huge legacy that the family has contributed to Indian education scene, right? When you create an institution or an EdTech, or I love the name, by the way, Brain. We were thinking of how to pronounce it, like Maniac. It's called Brain Maniac, right? Is it Brainiacs? So how do you, since this is about building a brand, what has been your experience? What has been your learnings? How have you tried to move away from Birla, that is a social responsibility education group, to an EdTech?
The edtech, of course, since I'm into both verticals, I'm into edtech and into K-12 schooling. Obviously, like you said, with the name, with the family name, there comes a huge social responsibility also, which needs to be upheld to the society, to the public, to the parents, all of it. But beyond the name, there are a lot of other factors that come into play. And even when running a successful school or running a successful brand, we are mainly into the franchising business under Birla Open Minds, but we also run our own schools. And in both verticals, I've experienced that advertising and marketing are like a very skimming the surface kind of part of it, very trivial matter. Because I think the main goal or objective for any educational institution is impacting the future of the kids and staying with them for life. Like when I still remember my school days in a very, happy memory, happy times. And they were kind of the formative years for my personality, for my character. So I think for educational institutes these days also, that's way more important than brand awareness. The brand awareness eventually follows when it comes to this. Like I know schools, a lot of times we've gone for school visits and all, for other schools, not just our schools. And I've not seen one hoarding or one banner or anything of those schools all over the city. Yet they are thriving with over thousands of students. All the parents in other states also know about these schools, and they are like kind of go down as legacy schools. So I think that's what's important, that you focus more on the character build of the students, try to impart them something other than just the core subjects. So at Open Minds, we don't have just the core subjects and curriculum learning. We also have a lot of skill development that comes into play for all the students, actually part of their curriculum. So stuff like financial literacy, communicative English, even vlogging we've introduced in some of the upper tech cities like Hyderabad, Bangalore and all. We've also introduced a subject called soul science, which basically focuses on areas like stress management, leadership, bullying, peer pressure, all these things, social events. So I think when you put all of that into play and you put continuous development in R&D, teacher training so that they're taught to the global standards. So like a lot of my teachers from my schools have gone and transferred to IG and IB schools also, IGCSE and IB schools also. Because we have a multiple intelligence curriculum where it's an amalgamation of all boards. So teacher training is a huge and important play in it. So I think if you get all these elements right, then marketing is just like an add-on. So it's not really important. Plus I also feel that for any successful educational institution, only the first year is very important in terms of aggressive marketing or ATL kind of activities. But I think otherwise, after the first year, most of the footfalls or most of the numbers of the parents come from more from word of mouth, come from BTL campus activities, educational fairs, literacy workshops, all these kind of things. So I think for an educational institution, it's like a what I would call 5 saal ka game. So if any educational institution has thrived and functioned for 5 years successfully, then I think they're good for life.
So wonderful. Why these panels make so much impact and bring so much substance is because everybody brings to the table their own experience, and collectively, suddenly, in this 30 minutes, this panel has handed you down how many years of filtered experience, right? And that's where not only learning, networking is an important part of such events, but learning is so diverse, learning is so lateral, the way adult learning should be. We do have some time, and if I may open it up to the floor, happy to hear you ask questions if you wish, or just observations, thoughts, anything that you'd like to.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Dr. Dheeraj Mehrotra. I am a principal at a school in Lucknow, Kumwas Global School. My question to you is, do you think one can survive on its own brand, or how long does it take to build a brand? Or to borrow it from the market?
Well, this is quite ambiguous. I would say, again, there's not a definite time span. Depends on how much goodness you are putting into your school. Well, funds, of course, I will not deny, is a factor. You need good teachers. They say that if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So, teacher salaries, infrastructure, again, has its importance. If infrastructure is good, it advertises by itself that this school has 2 cricket field, nets, tennis courts. So the word of mouth spreads. So it depends on these factors: infrastructure, how good is the faculty, and how dedicated it is, how well it is trained, how well it is groomed, not just paying. When I say pay, I don't mean that just throw money at the teachers and school would be good. How well you orient them. You need people who really know the job inside out, who are able to orient the teachers, because it takes a lot of doing to orient, like CCE, for example. I was one of the pioneers. My research and life skills and emotional intelligence as a correlate of scientific attitude was the basis of the CCE curriculum that came in the country. I felt somewhere the teachers were not trained adequately. They didn't know exactly what is the purpose, why all this is being done. They took it as drudgery. So how well the teachers are oriented, how motivated they are, all those factors, there are so many of them, factors that go into deciding how soon, if at all, the name would be established. Though I would remove that if at all part phrase, because I have seen more or less it takes time. All schools do well. There is a demand. There's a lot of demand in the country of good schools, good teachers, faculty, principals. All schools sooner or later do well.
Right. So so what I feel in this case is that it's platforms like these that give you a chance to talk about the business of education, which which in many cases that we don't, right? So so I'm happy to be a part of this event where we're actually getting to talk about running education institutions rather than just what goes on within the classrooms. To answer your question, I feel that that the gestation period for an education institution to break even, right? Because that's how you get to know how your brand is built. I think that in terms of a K-12 institution would be anywhere between 7 to 8 years. And if you crack the code within those 7 to 8 years, as Nirvaan also said as well, which is 5 years, I think that he's referring to preschools in that case. Possibly, yeah. So what I've seen personally is that if you've cracked the code in terms of your brand for the first 7 to 8 years, and then you're set up for many more years to come. So what do you do within those first 7-8 years to make sure that your brand becomes a legacy brand in that region? There are lots of things that you have to do. But then coming back to what I opened with, that you got to circle around to what you actually do in the classrooms, because if eventually your brand is built from there. So your brand isn't just built through your ads. Then your brand isn't just built through your Facebook posts.
We need to walk the talk.
You have to walk the talk in the end. So they are, so everything is interlinked in the end. So how your faculty actually functions, what is the mindset of the teachers in the classroom, whether the students understand what is being taught, whether the students become successful brand ambassadors for you. So that depends on what you do in those first few years, which you've got to keep on doing for the rest of the lifetime of that institution as well.
Also, if I can add something onto that, from my experience, I think stakeholder and mainly parent feedback is super crucial in the first few years. So, like we have the system where we have a semester-wise parent feedback form where we make a score of like 100 and on different parameters ask them to fill that. So, we keep using that to continuously improve our systems process, and I've seen that's helped a lot because if these parents are happy, they'll come and they'll get 10 more. So yeah, that's worked out for us.
Yeah, I just want to add that it really is all about the attitude and the culture that you project. You know, as the classic saying goes, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You know, if I think of our own family's brand, the City Montessori schools, they're a strong brand. If you think of the sort of typical boxes that you take in building a brand, even the basics, for example, you know, till date we haven't got a consistent logo or color scheme or, you know, mission statement or all these things, right? We haven't got any of that. You know, we could talk about over the 60 years of CMS, 64 years, you know, the vision, the hard work that's gone into building things, the quality of education, all of that. You know, somebody who wants to praise the schools might say that this is how they've built their brand. Somebody who's a critic might say, well, they started in the right place at the right time. There were no other schools there. They started in 1959. And it's very hard to measure what is actually right. But one thing that has been consistent throughout is the culture. It's the sense of trust that people have in us. It's the passion with which, you know, the educators are infused with this desire to really nurture the children, and this feeling that if parents place their trust and place their children in our hands, those children are going to do well. And that comes not from strategy, but from the attitudes and from the culture you project and from how you interact with people. I think that's where it really comes down to.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think my other panelists have already covered all the points. What we've focused on is happiness quotient. Happiness quotient of teachers. You have to ensure that they are happy. They need to be looked after. Their professional development. When they are happy, they'll ensure that they are delivering the best with students. And you know, as a school, what we have also focused on is student voice and choice. So we don't just go and say, today we are going to learn this. It is more, you know, what is it that we want to do as a group, right? So similarly for teachers also. And parents. We also engage parents significantly in what we are trying to achieve. There are a lot of entrepreneurs who have their children studying at our school. So they also help us conduct sessions that encourage students to do well. And you know, these are you know, some of the things that we do which help us get more parents and you know, help us establish ourselves as a school that is walking the talk.
So we just ran out of time, and in conclusion, in these 27 years that I have founded Kalorex, if there's been one learning for me, it's this. So the RTE may come and go, it may become RTI. The 10th boards may be introduced, may be removed. The CCEs may get a different color and shape. The pandemics will come and go and challenge us to do different things. What remains constant, and which is the fundamental, the very root of education, is the human element. We are only shaping human beings. If we never lose sight of that, everything else is secondary, everything else is temporary. With that, it's been a pleasure to be part of such a wonderful panelist. Can I please hear it for the panelists here? And thank you so much for being such a lovely and very, very diligent audience, actually. I've seen everybody listening very well. Good student body here. Very nice. Thank you so much. With that, we'll conclude. Thank you so much.